Good morning, evening or afternoon, depending when you are tuning into this, the latest episode of Edie's Susty Talk. Launched at the beginning of the UK lockdown, Susty Talk is designed to keep you guys connected to the UK's sustainability leaders and involved in the conversations about the green recovery, climate crisis, and all manner of other discussions. And I'm delighted that for this episode, we have Stu Meades tuning in, who is energy and sustainability consultant for the University of Goldsmiths. How are you doing, Stu?
I'm really good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. And I can see that you're sat at home like me. So it'd be good to hear about how yourself and your colleagues have been working during this time.
Well, I'm a freelance consultant, so I work from home anyway. So for me, lockdown has been not that much of a change from the norm. I normally travel sort of once a week or every other week, so I haven't travelled anywhere for a while. But luckily, I live in a lovely area of the country. So for me, yeah, lockdown's been business as usual, with the added complication of homeschooling. But other than that, it could have been much worse.
No, I'm sure a lot of people can sympathise with you there. I've definitely had a few toddlers popping up on calls over the past few weeks, and I think it's the first time we've had you on for a podcast or for a video. So would you mind telling us a bit about how long you've worked with Goldsmiths?
Yeah, so I'm a freelance energy sustainability consultant. I'm from a sort of background of commercial sector and NHS. I've been with Goldsmiths since last August, and they brought me in to help them frame their sustainability strategy and take their aspirations and put it into a logical strategy, which is what we've come to now.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then for those who are listening and haven't seen the new strategy, it's called Plan 25, and it's headlined by a net zero target for 2025 covering scope 1 and 2 emissions, but it forms part of a wider green and green recovery plan for the university. There's also challenges in there about waste management, behaviour change and teaching and learning. So it'd be great to hear about how you came up with some of the key focus areas and timeline dates for the plan, and just to give people a quick overview of what it entails.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So there's four main themes to the Green New Deal and the Green Recovery Plan for Goldsmiths. So that's decarbonisation, environmental enhancement, academic research, and then curriculum development. And the Plan 25 is really focused on the decarbonisation element of it.
Right.
When I was brought into the mix, the university had already declared its aspirations to be net zero by 2025, and they'd had a big press release, and they'd also had some other goals and some other immediate initiatives, such as banning beef, which was picked up widely in the press. Mm-hmm. I then came in, and for me, it was about taking those wider aspirations and kind of framing them down and developing them into kind of logical paths. So what we did is we expanded it out a little bit to include much more of the scope 3 emissions work that mainly wasn't captured within the initial press release. Mm-hmm. So what I was able to do is spend a lot of time on site and actually analyse what they've got on site from a scope 1 and 2 perspective. And from there, we came up into these logical pathways of heating, cooling, BMS, insulation, etc. But then adding on to that, the extra elements of increasing the recycling. We want to dramatically reduce the amount of single-use plastics on site by 2025. And then we've done a big focus piece on the scope 3 and decarbonising the supply chain. What we were able to do there was actually go through the full spend analysis of the 18-19 year and actually superimpose that to the emissions factors to develop the target areas. So from there, we've then got these targets about reducing the carbon intensity of transport and travel by 50% by 2025. We want to reduce the carbon intensity of printing paper teaching materials by the same amount, by 50% by 2025. And we've got other targets in there then about reducing the carbon intensity of construction, of catering and events as a whole, and a multiple of others. And what we anticipate is by combining all of those together, they're going to reduce the intensity of the scope 3 emissions by about 15%, and that's the influenceable scope 3 emissions by about 35% by 2025, which is quite fantastic, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so scope 3 is something we're definitely seeing a lot more conversation around, and as well as scope 3, a buzzword that I'm seeing a lot in strategies is collaboration. and this plan has a lot on that. It has collaboration with different academic departments in the university and outside. It has measures to work with local communities and business. And I was wondering whether you think this is something we'll see more of post pandemic.
I think we will, and I think, you know, the world is there's an awful lot happening at the moment with the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter and all of those issues that are coming out, and sort of the wider protest movements, multiplied by, I think, social factors such as, you know, Extinction Rebellion is very loud in the background. I think for me, climate change and social economic equality, they are completely interwoven as two different things. I think by its very nature, climate change affects the most marginalised and the most vulnerable on a local level, on a national level, and on an international level. So for us to make progress to reduce emissions, for us to make progress to change behaviours and to tackle climate change, I think it's only right that we are interweaving that with social change, with interacting with different communities, with listening to different stakeholders, and with making sure that it's a comprehensive approach that takes in all opinions and all views. I think there needs to be a huge amount of stakeholder engagement moving forward, because, as I said, they are completely interwoven.
I guess it will be helpful as well. People are looking for efficiencies at the moment and for relationships, so I can imagine there are benefits there too.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, for me, one of the things that I've seen over the last 3 months with the pandemic is, you know, if you'd sat there a year ago and said, this is what's going to happen, we're going to basically shut the country down, everybody's going to work from home, businesses would have said, no way, we can't do that, it'll never work. And it has worked. And yes, there's been huge issues, and I'm not belittling the issues at all, but, you know, businesses will find a way, industry will find a way. And I think what we need to do is take the positives and the positive learnings from what's happened over the last 3 months and apply them, because I think as we go back to a new normal and people are repopulating all these big office blocks and going back to work, I think a lot of people are going to be saying, why do we need to do this? You know, we saw another way and it wasn't perfect, but it's definitely pointing the right way. It's pointing a different direction that we can take.
Great. And I was going to ask sort of what the differences were between creating a strategy pre-pandemic and during pandemic, but you've covered that a lot. But it would be good to hear about as well. I know you mentioned that you've done some work for some private sector businesses and for the NHS, and what's the difference between sort of creating a plan for them and then working with a university, for example?
I think there's a huge amount of similarities between a university and a business, because it's all about bottom line. It's got to remain viable. It's got to remain cash positive. But I think one of the biggest differences with a university is the willingness to be more radical. I think the willingness to do things in a quicker way and accelerate progress. Plus, I think universities have got a naturally younger, more dynamic and more militant, potentially, demographic. So the greenwash factor doesn't run within a university that it might run within a large corporation, because I think students are more unforgiving than shareholders to some extent, right, within green progress.
No, just the divestment movement springs to mind. I've seen since I started this job 2 years ago, so many student protests saying your strategy isn't enough, you need to divest immediately. So I've definitely seen that in my work for Edie too.
And that's something that Goldsmiths did straight away, was divest everything, which was fantastic.
Great. And then I have to ask really. So we had West Midlands Combined Authority on recently, and they had a green recovery plan with a net zero target in what they thought was probably the first one for a local authority, especially a combined authority. And from what I've seen, this is the first sort of green recovery plan from a university. Do you think that it could act as a blueprint for other higher education organisations too?
Yeah, I think it could actually. I think it's a great foundation that could actually be tailored to other organisations. So yes, I think it most certainly could. I know Goldsmiths are very keen about putting themselves into a leadership position and making the change and demonstrating to other organisations that this is what they can do. And I think that's fantastic. And I think that yes, there's a huge amount of of opportunity there for other organisations to take that blueprint and apply it to themselves.
Great. Well, that's a good note to end on. So that'll be my last question for you today, Stu, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. Thank you very much, Edie, for having me.
No problem. And for everyone that's watching, fear not. This is not the last episode of Susty Talk. We will be publishing new episodes every week. And in the meantime, you can check out the Susty Talk tag on edie.net or look at our YouTube channel for all past episodes. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay connected, and keep up the Susty Talk.